This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening and thank you for being with us. Brittany is away this week. Winnipeg police are investigating a video circulating online that has a city councillor worried. Sherry Rowlands spoke out about it in an open letter to the mayor. The CBC's Josh Crabb has the story.
Fort Rouge East Fort Garry councillor Sherry Rowlands is speaking out over a video and social media posts. She says the material being shared online has left her feeling targeted as a Jewish Zionist who holds public office.
In some cases, community actually forwards posts that I and my family members are included in.
Rowlands says the latest concern is this video, which Winnipeg police confirm is now under investigation.
In order to move the needle and eventually destroy the status quo.
The video, which was shared with Rowlands by concerned community members, includes a link to the Direct Action Movement for Palestinian Liberation. A portion of the 6.5-minute post states in order to bring forth the change, you must bring disruption and disturbances by hindering entrances into certain buildings, including city halls and municipal buildings.
Creating obstructions and direct sabotage.
The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg emailed a screenshot to CBC, which appears to show this video was shared on Instagram's Stories feature by the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba account. Those posts automatically disappear. It's unclear who shared the video. Ramsey Zeid is the president of the organization and the owner of the Maryland Street Food Fair. In light of the video shared by his organization and other social media posts, Rowlands says Scott Gillingham should take away the Mayor's Biz Zone Award given to Zeid on May 15th.
Mr. Zeid is attempting to have some difficult discussions with perhaps very imperfect language, but there has to be consequences to that.
Rowlands raised these concerns, among others, in an open letter to the mayor. Gillingham made no mention of plans to revoke the award.
The award was given to a business, not to an individual. Councillor Rowlands sits on the board of the organization that brought forward the nomination. So the councillor should speak as a board member to her fellow board members and to the executive director.
Ramsey Zeid says he's seeking legal advice about what Councillor Rowlands wrote to the mayor. He says he's honored to have received the Biz Award for his work in the community and that he's saddened and sickened by civilian deaths in Gaza. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg man is warning others after a lien was placed on his home and the properties of 13 others. The liens were placed by a creditor who was looking to recoup money from a person with the same name. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut explains.
When Jaswinder Brar got a notice in the mail that said a $127,000 lien had been placed on his home, he freaked out.
The first thing I did was pop in my blood pressure medication. So I knew this is going to be a very scary roller coaster ride.
The 45-year-old software engineer says a financing company claimed he owned money on a semi-truck lease. He knew right away they had the wrong guy. He later learned the company placed liens on 14 properties owned by numerous people named Jaswinder Singh Brar.
I feel they just wanted to flush out all the Jaswinder Brars and get to the real one. But they shouldn't have to do that.
He searched online and easily found U.S. transportation safety records for the trucking company that is named alongside Jaswinder Brar in the court judgment. It's registered at a completely different Winnipeg address. The lien was removed from his property after Brar provided his identification, proving he was not that guy. Still, he feels the onus should not be on the innocent to prove they are not guilty.
Experts in the field say creditors don't always know how many assets a person owing money might own. And so sometimes they will place liens on multiple properties to try and ensure they've covered all the bases.
While Brar is happy he was able to have the lien removed, he says this shouldn't happen to anyone. The onus should be on creditors to find the right person, instead of allowing them to target multiple people who share the same name. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A man convicted of killing his neighbor in rural Manitoba in 2021 has been sentenced to life in prison. A jury convicted Eric Wildman of first-degree murder earlier this year in the June 2021 death of Clifford Joseph. He was officially sentenced in court this morning. Prosecutors argued Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle when he caught Joseph trying to steal from him in the village of Stead, Manitoba, then shot and killed Joseph at another location. Wildman was on the run for days before he was found at a home in Ontario and fired at officers. He was sentenced to 10 years in relation to that incident earlier this year. His lawyer has said he plans to appeal his murder conviction. RCMP say they are investigating the death of a man whose remains were found north of Winnipeg last fall as a homicide. Police were called to a home in the Arm of Rockwood just off of Highway number 7 last November. They found the remains of a man who has now been identified as 75-year-old Dimitar Rachev. They say his death is suspicious. Investigators revisited the location on May 15th and did a secondary ground search. Officers now want to speak with anyone who had contact with Rachev after November 1st of 2024. Investigators also released a picture of a man who they believe may have information about the homicide. Jeff Wharton is speaking to media for the first time after he was fined last week for violating the Conflict of Interest Act. He says he thought he was in the right to try and approve a silica sand mine in southeastern Manitoba. For more, we're joined by the CBC's Ian Fraze in the newsroom. So Ian, what was Wharton's explanation?
Well, yeah, he says he thought the outgoing PC government was allowed to approve the mine during those few weeks after losing the 2023 election, but before the NDP was sworn in. Wharton is reacting to a recent report from Manitoba's Ethics Commissioner. It found 3 senior Tories acted improperly by pushing to approve a controversial silica sand mining proposal after the PC's election defeat. Wharton is the only one of the 3 still in politics and the only one to apologize. The commissioner found Wharton called 2 former cabinet ministers asking them to approve the project.
Obviously, I shouldn't have done that, and that's what I apologize for, was making those phone calls and asking my colleagues if there was any way that this could move forward, and that's where it was, and that's the end of that.
Wharton denies pressuring his colleagues. He says he was just advocating for a project he thought would benefit Manitoba's economy. The NDP proceeded to reject that project several months later.
Meanwhile, the Tories say they warned the government of a dangerous intersection, and now someone has lost their life there. What are the PCs talking about?
Yeah, Selkirk MLA Richard Pershott has talked in the past in question period about this dangerous intersection in the R&M of St. Andrews, Highway 8 and Highway 67, where people have died. And then last week, another fatality happened. An 18-year-old man killed when his SUV collided with a semi-trailer. Pershott says the government could have done something to try to prevent this.
There's been no action taken, and even a week and a half ago I brought this up again, saying we have to do something before a fatality happens. And unfortunately, an 18-year-old has lost her life at that intersection.
Infrastructure Minister Lisa Naylor revealed today the government is looking at safety improvements. Naylor says that's been in the plans all along, as well as adding passing lanes on Highway 8. Riley.
Thank you, Ian. That's CBC's Ian Fraze in the newsroom. Winnipeg police have identified the victim of a homicide on Friday. Officers were called to the 300 block of Cumberland Avenue around 1 a.m. The homicide unit has named the victim as 39-year-old Ralph Moyes. He is a member of the Saisi Dene First Nation living in Tuduli Lake. There's no word on a suspect or suspects. Meanwhile, a man is recovering in hospital after a shooting in Winnipeg's North End over the weekend. It happened near Mountain and Salter around 3 o'clock Saturday afternoon. A witness told CBC the man was shot while riding his bike. Winnipeg police say they found the 39-year-old victim with serious upper body injuries. They're asking anyone with information or surveillance footage to contact Major Crimes or Crime Stoppers. All right, you're looking at some shots of the Gimli Harbor this afternoon. A nice sunny but hazy one out there. Meteorologist Colette Kennedy is watching our weather for us this week.
Thanks, Riley. Nice to be with you tonight. All right, I have to stand here. Here we are at the end of a month, just about, and I have to be here to tell you we are moving in to another situation of some heat really building and some dry conditions over the next several days. I know many of you are already aware of this and feeling it, like Lynn Lake to Swan River, where we're talking about temperatures this afternoon at 27, a little more comfortable towards the southeast, but that heat is going to keep climbing as we get it pushing from the northwest to the southeast. Comfortable tonight, 8 degrees for the low, just a few clouds tomorrow morning, a lot of sunshine and 13 degrees, but into the afternoon, into the mid-20s, and you'll notice I have here a slight thunderstorm risk actually in the forecast. So yes, the potential for some lightning strikes, which of course we don't need. I'll go into more detail on this coming up.
Thanks, Colette. Frustration is growing among some permanent residents and cottagers at Whiteshell Provincial Park. They are still waiting to hear when they'll be able to return home after the province lifted evacuation orders for some parts of the park. And as the CBC's Gavin Axelrod reports, some residents say they feel like there has been a lack of communication.
Come on, Jill.
Wildfire forced Jocelyn and Jason Martin to leave their longtime home in West Hawk Lake.
There she be. There's our life.
They're staying nearby with relatives in Falcon Lake, waiting for answers, like why parts of Whiteshell Provincial Park like Falcon and Barron Lake have reopened, even though just down the road, places like West Hawk remain closed.
We are watching people go to the golf course and a fishing tournament, and I'm not against any of this, of these weddings. I feel like the frustration for people just really close to here and close to the spots in the North Whiteshell that are not open beside open areas, people don't understand.
The Martins say residents and cottagers have been left in the dark, combing through social media posts, relying on word of mouth to get information.
The park may be forced into this for some time, but there's got to be some powers to be that can give us better risk assessment and tell us what's going on. And that's, I think, what everybody's looking for.
The fire that started in Ingolf and spread to the Whiteshell was listed at 1,700 hectares in size Sunday. The province sends out updates through fire bulletins and to groups like the Whiteshell Cottagers Association and Chamber of Commerce.
If we had a reeve, I think that this would look a lot different.
Barb Bobichuk had to leave her home in Caddy Lake because of the fire. It's also still closed.
There's not enough information. We need to know where the fire's moving. Are they being held? How many people are working on them? Have they changed direction?
She'd like to see a provincial website dedicated to Whiteshell fire updates.
That gives you all the information, tells you who you can contact if you have questions. There has to be someone in charge. And if there's not, then that needs to change.
The province said Sunday most of the Whiteshell remains closed, and the state of emergency is still in place. They also say as soon as people can go home, they'll be notified. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Whiteshell Provincial Park.
More than 300 people living in Pimicikamak Cree Nation have been forced out of their homes due to smoke coming from wildfires burning near that community. Of most concern is a fire burning out of control just a few kilometers southwest of the First Nation. It is now more than 1,600 hectares in size. Vulnerable residents, the elderly, and people with respiratory issues have been told to leave. Now, that fire is one of 17 currently burning across the province. Elsewhere, the community of Sheridan has been evacuated. That is because of a 1,600-hectare fire burning out of control near the community there. Wabodin has declared a state of local emergency because of a fire burning about 2 kilometers away from town. And in eastern Manitoba, planning has begun for a possible evacuation of Bassett due to the fire that originated near Bird River. The province says there is still significant wildfire threats in eastern Manitoba, and all returning residents have been told they must be prepared to leave again with little notice. And of course, from wildfires to wildfire smoke, a lot of that fueled by the weather, the wind, and the very dry conditions. Let's get another check on our forecast with meteorologist Colette Kennedy.
Thanks, Riley. Yeah, I mean, here we go into this pattern that is not going to be helpful. Now, a few things in here. Yes, the risk of some lightning strikes, but also some winds. Now, that'll be changing things up in terms of the smoke at the surface and our air quality, hazy conditions that we've been dealing with. So let me break it all down and we'll kind of look through the next several days. I mean, even this morning, Winnipeg, there was at least 1 hour reporting that smoke in the skies. So just the broad broad picture is this ridge of high pressure. Yeah, this big dome, which brings dry conditions. But I want to just point a feature out here. See that, just that little clip there in the isobar. And that's where we're starting to get this trough development. It gets enhanced as it moves over the lakes, but that trough is just enough of a lift that by tomorrow afternoon, I mean, they're very widely scattered, but a few thunderstorms potentially bubbling up. And it's not the moisture with these. We could use some moisture. It's the lightning strikes and that potential to ignite any of the grasses and getting into more wildfires or enhancing what's been happening. So that's something to watch carefully. Now, there's still a slim chance into Wednesday as well, but it's more like some isolated features here. So not as much of a concern. Just be watching tomorrow very carefully. The other thing we know happening, the temperatures building. I'm going to show you those in a moment, but I want you to kind of look at the winds. Now, we've got stronger winds to the northeast near Churchill, but if you look at the yellow figures, those are the gusts. And when we start to see gusts that are at 30 or over 30, that can really have an impact too of mixing the air, which could be positive or it can be negative, depending if it's pushing smoke in your direction or diffusing it. And what we're going to see with Eastman is that there's actually going to be some diffusion of that smoke at the surface. So air quality improving over time, though, as we move through into late Tuesday and early Wednesday, Flin-Flon, you'll have some of that smoke coming back in your direction. So just over the next 5 days in terms of how this heat is going to play out. That slim chances tomorrow. Otherwise, most will experience sunny skies and just a warming trend. But boy, does it warm as we push towards the end of the week. Thursday, Friday, we're up to 30. And by Saturday, indeed, we're talking about a high into the weekend of 33 degrees. And still, these will be dry days. So a lot to really unpack here. I'll have more details on all of this coming up with the 7-day forecast.
Yeah, not a lot of rain in the forecast there. Thank you, Colette. A BC man is going public in a bid to restore his credit rating. His score was suddenly reset, making it difficult to get a credit card or a loan. Rosa Marcatelli explains the little-known rule that allowed that to happen.
David Tregear says getting credit was never a problem until the rejections piled up. A car loan, credit cards, and more, all denied. He checked his Equifax account, shocked to see his credit score was reset to 0.
Well, I was just stunned. I was like, what do you mean I don't have a credit? Like, are you kidding me?
Credit scores help lenders decide if you're trustworthy with credit. Higher score, better access. Tregear complained to Equifax nothing worked. A big problem, he says, because many lenders rely on that credit bureau.
I've always had to call in and with no success.
He says Equifax wouldn't give him a clear answer until Go Public got involved. Only then did the credit bureau point to its little-known rule that says if an account is inactive, the consumer may be labeled unscorable, and that person's credit score dropped to 0. Tregear says it's true. He stopped using credit to avoid getting into debt, never thinking he'd be punished for it. Equifax now tells him the cutoff is 2 years, but won't say if that applies to everyone.
Turns out there are no rules on how bureaus should manage credit scores, allowing them to do what they want.
It's been crazy.
He turned to these consumer protection agencies for help, but didn't get any.
Everybody was just referring me back to somebody else.
TransUnion, Canada's other major credit bureau, says it doesn't reset scores. A consumer advocate wants Ottawa to set clear national standards rather than leaving oversight to provinces with a patchwork of regulations.
It tells me that there's a lack of common sense rules in place governing these two very important credit bureaus.
Equifax wouldn't talk specifics, instead sending a general statement, partly saying it prides itself on being a trusted steward of personal data. After hearing from Go Public, 2 provincial consumer protection agencies reached out to Tregear. One admitted it shouldn't have turned him away. But with Equifax's policy still in place, Tregear fears nothing will change. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
King Charles and Queen Camilla have arrived in Canada a day before Charles delivers the speech from the throne, signaling the start of the new session of Parliament. This is his 20th trip to Canada, but his first as king. It's a symbolic visit meant to underscore Canada's sovereignty. CBC's Marina von Stackelberg has the story.
A royal welcome to Canada's king. Charles and Camilla are in the capital for a short but significant trip. The visit is meant to show the United States that Canada is not interested in becoming its 51st state.
God save the king! God save the king!
Ottawa wants to remind the world, unlike the U.S., Canada is a constitutional monarchy and a sovereign nation.
So it's a good day for Canada.
Prime Minister Mark Carney personally requested the royal visit. He has repeatedly pointed to Canada's founding by British, French, and Indigenous peoples as one of the ways Canada is fundamentally different than its neighbor to the south.
Canada is Canada and will never be anything else.
It reinforces that we are a sovereign nation, having the king here, and that we're not for sale.
In the theme of Canadian pride, the king was part of a ceremonial puck drop. He mingled with the packed crowd, keen to catch a sight of the royals.
I only got a glimpse of them, but I'm still so happy to be here.
Our tradition and heritage comes from the monarchy, and we're grateful.
Their Majesties toured a farmer's market.
The king asked me about the radishes. He said, my goodness, those are beautiful radishes.
It's a nod to the push to buy local Canadian goods in the thick of a trade war.
We're Canadians. We're a strong nation. We're a sovereign nation. We need to stay that way, and we can do this. We can get through these tough times together as a nation.
And at Rideau Hall, the King's official residence in Canada, Charles planted a tree and had a meeting with the Governor General.
Here on Tuesday will be the main event. From inside the Senate, the King will deliver the speech from the throne. He's the first monarch to do that in nearly 50 years. It will lay out this new government's priorities and vision for the future of Canada. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
So Tuesday's speech from the throne signals the start of a new session of Parliament. That also means MPs are back in the House of Commons for the first time in nearly 6 months. There are more than 100 new faces following the spring election, including Prime Minister Mark Carney himself, as well as a new occupant in the Speaker's chair. Rafi Boudjikanian has that story.
A day of firsts. This veteran Quebec Liberal MP's inaugural as Speaker of the House.
I would remind members that we are at the beginning of a mandate in the selfish hope that you will afford me a little grace period.
Francis Scarpaleggia will be the new House referee, voted in by his peers from all political parties to trade his partisan affiliation and ability to vote for the responsibility of maintaining decorum in the Commons.
As I rise in this House for the first time, I hope you will permit me to thank my constituents in Nepean.
It was also the Prime Minister's day one in the chamber.
I have much to learn from the members of this great House. I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason.
Just shy of a majority, the Liberals lose one more voice in key votes as they set out their legislative agenda.
How can you afford that, given you're so close to a majority?
Well, I don't know what to say to that. We're going to have a Liberal Speaker. The House elects a Speaker.
But some have bigger issues. The Conservatives first, their leader is not in the House of Commons. Andrew Scheer picking up some duties after Pierre Poilievre lost his seat in last month's vote and has to wait for the summer and a chance at a by-election redo.
This is where the government is held to account. They have an enormous amount of power, and we, parliamentarians, must provide ruthless scrutiny.
And then there's the NDP, returning to Ottawa with just 7 MPs, losing official party status. That would typically remove parliamentary budgets for research, staff, even office space. The New Democrats negotiating with the government to keep some of these amenities.
We've already made some progress. For instance, we have access to the lobby. We've kept our offices.
The Liberals' priorities include the Canada-US relationship and knocking down trade barriers. Carney has also said that he won't table a budget until the fall, and that could be the first bone of contention in this sitting, as opposition parties try to pressure him to reveal the government's finances sooner. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Many in the small Ontario town of Wharton are still reeling after last week's devastating crash that killed 4 teenage athletes and their teacher outside of London. The CBC's Lisa Shing has more on how the victims are being remembered in their hometown.
It's a heavy day here in Wharton. Students were heading to school this morning. There was almost complete silence. There was no laughter. It's clear they're still trying to cope with this tragedy, trying to figure out why this happened to their school community. Parents were telling me as well that they found it unfathomable that 5 people were taken from them. The school tells me that mental health workers are on site to support students through this, especially the high schoolers who may have known the students as well as the teacher. What we know about what happened: 5 people were killed Friday afternoon. The teenagers were 16 and 17 years old. Olivia Rourke, Rowan McLeod, Cadence Ford, and Danica Baker, as well as 33-year-old teacher and coach Matt Eckert. They were traveling back to Wharton from London, Ontario, from a softball tournament, and they were about half an hour outside of London, Ontario, where the crash happened. All police will tell us is that their SUV crashed into a transport truck, and then the SUV then crashed into another SUV. We don't know much more than that, but police are still investigating what happened. This is a community that is small, that is tight-knit. Everyone I've spoken to seems to either be directly connected to one of the families or multiple families, or know someone who knows them. It is 5,000 people, and so I think this tragedy has really resounded throughout the entire community as well. These were athletes, and they played in various sports leagues. Eckert coached lacrosse in a nearby town of Owen Sound. The girls played in various leagues in surrounding communities too, so the grief is wide-reaching. There was a candlelight vigil last night in front of the school, and the parking lot was packed with people, with students, with parents, with teachers, and people in the community as well who wanted to come together and grieve. There have been grassroots movements, people urging community members to put shoes out on the porch in tribute. So it's very clear that despite this tragedy that has resounded throughout the community of Wharton, that there's also a lot of love and a lot of support here. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Wharton, Ontario.
British police have arrested a 53-year-old man in Liverpool after a vehicle rammed into a large crowd of soccer fans. It happened at a parade celebrating the city's Premier League football championship. Authorities say a minivan drove into the crowd and hit a number of pedestrians just minutes before top players had been riding along that parade route in an open-top vehicle. It is unclear how many people were injured or to what extent. Tens of thousands of fans had lined the streets for the celebration. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer described the scene as appalling. Health officials in Gaza say the latest Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 50 people. One strike hit a school that was being used as a shelter for the displaced. It's happening as tensions are high in Israel to mark Jerusalem Day. The ramped-up Israeli offensive has made aid delivery challenging. While some has begun trickling in, crowds have overwhelmed delivery vehicles in some areas. To Ukraine, Kyiv says Russia has carried out its largest drone attack yet in its 3-year-old war against Ukraine. The Ukrainian Air Force says Moscow launched more than 350 drones and 9 cruise missiles. And U.S. President Donald Trump did not mince words when it came to criticizing Russian leader Vladimir Putin's actions. Willem Marks reports.
There was some intemperate language from the US president responding to questions from journalists in the wake of the latest devastating attacks on Ukrainian cities, including the capital, Kyiv.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all. I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
President Trump took to social media following that outburst, describing President Putin, who he'd known for a long time, as having gone absolutely crazy and warning this behavior, if it continues, could lead to the downfall of Russia. He also voiced some criticism for President Zelensky of Ukraine, saying that he needed to watch what he said because his words were creating problems. The Kremlin responded to this outburst by describing President Trump's words as an emotional overload and saying that the Russian presidency, as well as the Russian people, were grateful for the American president's intervention in kickstarting negotiations. The next round of talks will likely take place in the Vatican next month. They will likely include European leaders, perhaps the Ukrainian president, and certainly senior officials from the United States. What's not clear after President Putin failed to turn up for talks this month in Istanbul is whether senior Russian officials will participate. Willem Marks for CBC News, London.
Experts are worried a herd of endangered caribou in Manitoba may never recover. This after wildfires have destroyed much of their habitat right at the time when female caribou are usually giving birth. The CBC's Ian Fraze reports.
Woodland caribou rely on the dense, mature forests of southeastern Manitoba. But due to this raging wildfire, their habitat is in jeopardy.
It doesn't bode well for the health of the population long term.
Ecologist Daniel DuPont has studied this caribou herd for years. He says the 100,000-hectare fire at Nopaming Provincial Park comes at a terrible time, calving season.
Most of the females are likely within that area that was burnt.
He says the Nopaming area is home to between 40 to 60 woodland caribou. Any survivors will be scrambling to find an established forest. They need it, unlike other wildlife local to Manitoba.
We see deer in cities, we see deer in fields, whereas caribou are very sensitive to any type of disturbance, whether natural or human disturbance. Unfortunately, caribou are one of those species that are more vulnerable.
That could push the declining population farther north.
Those southern populations have gradually been lost over the years.
A conservationist is worried the caribou might never return to the burned lands.
We're really, really concerned that this southern caribou range that we've been talking about protecting for more than 25 years may well be gone now.
Eric Rader says Manitoba needs to better protect these habitats. Woodland caribou are an endangered species in the province, threatened by wildfires, climate change, and human development.
We've been talking about how to care for caribou for a long, long time.
The province says it hasn't received reports of any caribou deaths yet, but the government is promising to review how it manages the species after this wildfire is under control. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The province is spending more than $1 million to expand Verdon's airport. It's something locals say will create jobs in the community and improve emergency medical access in Western Manitoba. $1.6 million will be spent to help the regional airport build a bigger runway. Right now, the airport is used for crop dusters, medical transports, and by an aviation school. In 2019, the airport didn't have any employees. Well, now it employs 33 people from pilots to maintenance staff.
What's important to us for being small town and from here, we want to try to help grow it. So it's a passion for us in a rural community, and we have to. Rural Canada has to survive, right? So we need to make those investments in rural Canada.
The improvements also include a new automated weather observation system. All right, we were talking about wildfires earlier, of course, not being helped by the hot, dry weather that we've seen as of late across the province. Let's get another check on our forecast and that very hot pattern with meteorologist Colette Kennedy.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. You know, I think I'll start off with kind of getting into the whys. The why is this happening, going back into a pattern like this? And in fact, if you look at the jet stream, okay, those upper winds in the atmosphere, pushing way to the north, some extreme ridging going on here. And that's why, in fact, the heat has been building not only to the west, but to the northwest. Warmer today, actually, in portions of northwest Manitoba than in southeastern Manitoba. And that's because of that ridging, but that heat is spreading to the southeast. So the jet stream going around that ridge and just kind of breaking down the conditions you can expect. Now, through the overnight, generally just dry and some comfortable readings as well for sleeping. They are getting a little bit, even these overnight lows are not really going to be over the next several days providing relief, as they will still be warm and getting a bit above the norms for this time of year. But I'll tell you, as you look at some of the temperatures for tomorrow, this is just at noon, not even at peak heating. There comes some upper 20s again. Lynn Lake, yeah, that potential perhaps even warmer than today, at least as warm. And further south, you get an idea. Again, by lunchtime, we've got lots of 20s already showing up for us, and that is going to continue to build and spread eastward. So a few of those thunderstorms, yes, that possibility is there too. So really watching for the lightning strikes and hoping that we don't see anything further igniting. Okay, let's end on a more positive note here and take a look at Bridget, please. Jeff sent us Bridget. I love this toy. My dog loves to have the balls, although you can't get the ball back away, a retriever that won't retrieve or at least get back. This looks like a very good girl. Bridget, very, very sweet. And in terms of what you're looking at for your dog walking forecast for Tuesday, well, I think you have an idea that perhaps late in the day, that's where we get into that risk of a few scattered thunderstorms bubbling up and the chance for the lightning strikes. But otherwise, you are looking at, yes, green pause and go. You're free to get out there. The only thing I think is just making sure that there's lots of water available, especially not so much tomorrow, but as that heat is going to keep on climbing as we move through the week. In fact, Riley will be getting into territory where the daytime highs are 10 to perhaps approaching 15 degrees above seasonal.
All right, thanks, Colette. Well, Canada's system of government relies heavily on traditions from the British Parliament. As King Charles prepares to deliver the speech from the throne, Eli Glasner takes a look at the pomp, ceremony, and ritual surrounding it.
A message from Her Excellency the Governor General.
So here we are again, the speech from the throne.
Congratulations. Together we move Canada forward.
Je suis heureuse d'ouvrir la première session. And a ceremony stuffed with symbolism.
A message from Her Majesty.
It's really about the tension between Parliament and the monarchy.
Mr. Speaker.
All the more appropriate because for the opening of the 45th session of Parliament, the King himself will read the speech, as opposed to the Governor General, who typically represents the Crown. On the big day, all eyes are on the Usher of the Black Rod, a senior parliamentary protocol officer who plays a pivotal role, including inviting the MPs to the Senate to hear the speech. And that is where the drama begins.
Usher of the Black Rod is just getting close to the doors of the House of Commons. Those doors will be slammed shut in the face of the usher. And this is symbolic.
Incredibly rude.
Yes, it can be incredibly rude. It is the House of Commons demonstrating their independence from the Crown.
At which point the usher knocks. Speech after speech, there's always been 3 knocks at the door. So what's with the closed doors and the knocking? Well, it goes back to the 17th century and a king who didn't respect the independence of the house.
During the 17th century, there was a major power struggle between the Crown and Parliament. During the reign of Charles I, Parliament felt that its rights were being circumscribed and that the king was acting arbitrarily.
And then in 1642, things really took a turn.
In the lead up to the English Civil War, Charles I brought soldiers and went into the floor of the then English House of Commons, seeking to arrest Oliver Cromwell, John Pym, and 3 other senior parliamentarians who, to the king, were threatening a civil war.
Which in part brought about the English Civil War and the execution of King Charles I.
Who rules England, a king or Parliament? The Civil War decided the answer is Parliament.
Which brings us back to the usher of the Black Rod, who, as the Crown's representative, must knock and request permission before entering the House of Commons.
The key point here is Black Rod cannot simply barge in and demand that the Commons come to hear the speech. Black Rod has to ask to be admitted, and the Commons have to agree that they will come.
Not all Black Rods are the same. The original was lost in the parliamentary fire of 1916. The replacement was snapped in half in 1967 and glued back together. After all the wear and tear, a new rod was restored as a gift for the Queen in 2016.
And that it is time for them to attend. And now
once the MPs follow the usher of the Black Rod to the Senate, you may notice another object that's part of the procession, the mace.
Going back to medieval times, the mace was a weapon of war to defend initially the king, and then it became appropriated by the House of Commons.
The mace is important because it represents royal authority. The mace has to be present in the room for either house to conduct business.
They resume what day? In fact, in the British Parliament during the Brexit debates, one MP put this to the test, grabbing the mace. He didn't get very far. With the royal robes and rods and maces, it might be tempting to see these traditions as relics from the past. But historians say, if anything, they're more relevant than ever.
At this particular time in the world, when democracy, legal rights are under challenge in many countries, I think it's very important for us to remember that we have these rights and why we have these rights, that people died to secure these rights for us, and that we should appreciate them.
Welcome back. Yes, we get to look at not only the 5-day forecast here, we'll digest that first, but even the 7-day, just to see how extreme these temperatures will be getting. Now keep in mind, again, a few scattered thunderstorms. That potential is there tomorrow afternoon, otherwise mid-20s. But as we move through the week, you got to put a 3 at the beginning. Yes, we get into those 30s and a stretch of dry days after that, risk for tomorrow and the slight chance into Wednesday. And seeing into the weekend too, those temperatures climbing, perhaps even warmer than 33. Hoping not, but maybe even warmer than this. However, as you look towards Monday, we will see a bit of a reset on those.
All right, thanks, Colette. Good reminder when you see temperatures like those and not a lot of rain that you'll want to keep up to date on those burn permits, those burn bans across the province, because things can get out of control very quickly. Well, a 75-year-old woman who lives in Mexico City has some very demanding house guests. And Katia Latouf is not just busy running a hummingbird sanctuary from her bedroom. The cancer survivor is also a health coach and supports patients undergoing cancer treatment. Her sanctuary takes in hundreds of sick or abandoned hummingbirds every year. The birds are cared for until they are strong enough to be released back into the wild. She's also an author, by the way, and finances the sanctuary using money from her book sales. Well, another animal story now. As summer nears, invasive plants can creep into green spaces, threatening native species. Well, who are you going to call for that? How about goat busters? An Ontario community's natural approach to the unwanted weeds is our daily lift. All right, so the city of Mississauga is sending this hardworking herd of goats around to city parks. They look like they really enjoy it. This dedicated herd was specifically raised to manage weeds and other plants. It's a bit of a win-win-win. Not only is it environmentally friendly, but I'm sure the goats also find these snacks particularly tasty.
We're still learning as well. We're trialing goats in different areas, different species, different weather conditions as well. So very effective so far, friendly, and attracts young families and children.
So this is prescribed goat grazing. It's being gained in popularity across the country, including here in our province. It's been so effective, the city calls them the hardest working members of the team. And they're pretty darn cute as well. And that is our program for this Monday. Thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. Colette and I will be back again for you tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful evening.